Hi guys, welcome back to 2.4 on completing the square with a leading coefficient. In this video, we're just going to go through 4 more examples of how to do this. Okay, so number 1, 3x squared minus 30x plus 17, we're going to convert to vertex form. So our first step is to factor out the leading coefficient from the first two terms. Our leading coefficient is 3, so we're going to factor out 3. And factor out means undistribute a 3 or kind of like divide it out and move it to the front. So if we do that, we're going to end up with 3 in front, and then we're going to ask ourselves, okay, what's left over if we undistribute the 3? So 3x squared, undistribute a 3 or divide out a 3, left over would be just x squared by itself. And then negative 30x, if we undistribute a 3 or divide by 3, we're going to be left with minus 10x. And then we still have plus 17. Okay, so now our next step is where we complete the square. And we're going to complete the square inside the parentheses. So I'm going to give myself a space to add something inside the parentheses that will complete the square for us. And then because I'm adding something, I need to subtract, and we're going to subtract outside the parentheses, and then we're going to have plus 17 at the end. I'm going to move. Okay, so completing the square, we use our coefficient of x, which is minus 10. So we're going to take minus 10, cut it in half, and then square it. And that gives us negative 5 squared, which is 25. So the number we're going to add to complete the square is 25. Then because we added a number, we also need to subtract a number, but we need to be careful because the leading coefficient complicates this a little bit. So when we added 25 inside those parentheses, we've actually secretly added 3 times 25, which is 75, because everything inside the parentheses is being multiplied by 3. So when we subtract outside, we need to subtract the full number that we added, which is 75. Okay, now our final step is to factor the perfect square that we have in the parentheses, and then combine our like terms outside the parentheses. So by completing the square, we set that up to be a perfect square, which is x plus or minus something all squared. And the number that goes in the parentheses is our coefficient of x divided by 2. So negative 10 over 2 is minus 5. So it'll be x minus 5 all squared. And then negative 75 plus 17, I need a calculator to do that, 58. So that will be minus 58. All right, and then since we're now in vertex form, let's practice quickly finding the vertex. So the x-coordinate of the vertex is inside the parentheses, and we flip the sign for our x values, so that would be a positive 5. The y value is the number outside the parentheses. We don't flip y values, so, whoops, negative 58. Okay, first example done. Next example, we're just going to do the same thing. So we'll start by factoring our leading coefficient out of the first two terms. So factor out or undistribute the 4. So we move it to the front. And then we ask ourselves, what's left over if we undistribute the 4? So 4x squared, undistribute a 4, we have x squared left. 80x, undistribute a 4, or divide by 4, we would have 20x left. And then we still have minus 61 on the outside. All right, next step is to complete the square inside the parentheses. So I'm going to give myself a space where I can add a number to complete the square. And then we know we're going to need to subtract outside so we don't change our function, and then we still have minus 61. Okay, to complete the square, we take our coefficient of x, which is 20, cut it in half, and then square it. So that gives us 10 squared, which is 100. So inside the parentheses, we add 100. Now we need to know what number do we subtract to keep our function the same. And instead of just subtracting 100, we have to incorporate the leading coefficient. So we've actually added 4 times 100, which is 400. So outside, we're going to subtract 400 to keep our function the same. And now finally, for our last step, we factor the perfect square that's inside the parentheses, and we combine our like terms outside the parentheses. So we're going to get 4 times a perfect square, so x plus or minus something squared, and it's our coefficient of x over 2, so 20 over 2 is plus 10. And then outside we have minus 400 minus 61, so minus 461. And there is vertex form for this function. And then really quick, let's find the vertex. So the x-coordinate is inside the parentheses, it's the 10, but we need to flip the sign for x-coordinates, so we get minus 10. The y-coordinate is outside, minus 461, and we don't flip y-coordinates. So there's our vertex. Minus 10, minus 461. Okay, I'm going to stop this video here. Those are the basic examples. In the next video, we're going to do 2 more examples where the leading coefficient is negative. And the process is exactly the same. You just have to pay a little bit more attention to your signs because dividing by negatives and multiplying by negatives will flip the sign. Okay.